All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday. Sophie, how you doing?
Good.
Doing okay?
Mhm.
Yeah, you look comfy there.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Um, Let me see who's here. Irene is here. Good morning, Irene. Michelle is here. Good morning, Michelle. Hadil is here. Good morning, Hadil. And Basil's here. Good morning. Yeah, hope everyone had a good weekend. Hope everyone got an extra day of either relaxation or work that you might have needed to do on Friday. I got professionally developed. Can you tell? I'm much more professional now than I was on Thursday, yes? No. Oh, that's there. Oh, it's because it was up here before. I didn't move it back. Okay. So on Thursday, yes. Thursday we were kind of into Republican Rome, right? And so we were talking, what's my next slide here? Oh yeah. We were talking a little bit about the fact that, Rome used to be ruled by the Etruscans. The Etruscans were the sort of big important culture in Italy prior to the rise of Rome. They were very kind of they were artistic and very sort of technologically advanced. They sort of dominated that part of the world, and for a while they dominated the Romans too, until the Romans kind of overthrew them. And so we heard a little bit about the Remus and Romulus story, the origin of Rome, the murder of brothers. And again, it's kind of weird for an origin story. Most cities have origin stories that are kind of heroic or sort of communicate something special about the people of that city or that city state. This one's kind of bent in a weird way, right? And so there's the murder of two brothers. Then we hear about the actually we didn't talk very much about this one, but the rape of the Sabine women, right? We said that Rome originally didn't really have any women living in it, but they needed women to build their city-state, and so they kidnapped a bunch from the neighboring Sabines, right? So there were a group living next to the Romans, kind of a different cultural or ethnic group, and the Romans kind of invited them over for a big celebration and then kidnapped all of their women and married them all. So again, that's kind of a dark founding myth for Rome, right? They're built on fratricide, the murder of a brother, and the sort of mass abduction and rape of these neighboring women. Either way, after the rape of Lucretia, which is another kind of founding myth, we know the Romans overthrow the Etruscans, and after about 100 years of war, finally manage to kick them out. And they create a political system that looks something like this, right? With sort of an assembly that is passing most of the laws. We have magistrates that are elected who are kind of running the business of government. We have two consuls at the top, which are kind of like co-kings, if you will, or co-presidents, however you want to look at that. We have a Senate that's kind of an advisory body at the top. And then we have these tribunes, right, which are able to introduce legislation, but maybe more importantly, they can stop anything from going through that might hurt the poor plebeians, right? Because we said the patricians were the sort of elite, powerful families of Rome. The patricians were just everybody else, and so the tribunes kind of protect the plebeians in Rome. We said there was this, what did we call this ladder thing? The ladder of a Roman's political career. What was the fancy Roman word for it? Try. I have so little fun in my life. Close, yeah. Well, actually, I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing it right. Maybe I'm not. Maybe that was the correct pronunciation, but I don't speak Latin. I'm saying cursus honorum. That's what I'm calling it. But again, I don't speak Latin, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Mulder's right. But whatever it is, however you want to say it, it's kind of the political ladder that you want. That if you want a political career in Rome, it's the ladder you have to climb, right? And Obviously, the consul is the most prestigious position. This is the one that your descendants will brag about you at dinner parties for generations after your death. They'll brag about how their great-great-grandfather or whatever was once consul of the Republic. Huge honor, right? But difficult to get to, right? You have to do 10 years of military service. You have to get elected to a lower magistracy, right? Like a quaestorship. And you kind of have to keep getting elected, right? And there's kind of age, there's age restrictions for each one, and they're competitive, right? There's a lot of people who might want a magistracy in the Roman Republic. And so to be elected, one of the 8 praetors, that's a competitive environment. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people living in Rome, right? Lots of people would love to be a praetor. So it's a competitive environment for these men who are trying to advance their political careers, which we'll get to a little bit later. And of course, once you've become a magistrate, when you retire, you can be a member of the Senate, right? And the Senate has lots of sort of status, lots of authoritas and gravitas and dignitas, and they kind of advise the rest of the government, right? So they're pretty important as well. Oh yeah, yesterday we tried to take a little glimpse into the life of some Roman citizens, right? Particularly some young men and young women. What did we see in the life of Lucius Popedius Secundus? All Roman men have 3 names like this. So what did we learn about Lucius's life? Mm-hmm. Indeed, he's a man. Oh my God. Okay, starting at the ground level. All right. Laying the groundwork here. Okay. Right. We saw in our second video with Domitia, his, all of the sisters were named Domitia, right? Which seems kind of strange to us, but kind of shows how much more important men were than women, right? The fact that men have 3 names to distinguish them, to distinguish their ancestry, and women just get 1 name, and in some cases the exact same name that their sisters get, right? Seems odd. Is odd to our modern eyes. What else did we learn about Lucius Popedius Secundus? He's the son.
He taught how to trade, but never let him trade by himself.
Say that one more time.
His father taught him how to trade.
Yeah.
But he did not let him trade by himself.
Right. So that was part of Lucius's education, right? He had a teacher. He had a teacher at home, and he was taught kind of academically, but his father was also teaching him kind of the rules of life, right? And so he was following his father around when his father went to the Roman Forum and into the law courts, and when his father was doing business deals, and his father did those business deals for Lucius because he wasn't old enough yet, right? He was only 17 and he needs to be 25, I think they said. So his father's kind of, giving him, I guess, a bit of a real life education. I don't know what you want to call that. What other skills was Lucius learning?
Running, swimming, fighting.
Yeah. So there were some physical aspects to his education, right? Running and fighting, especially if he wants to be a Roman soldier. If he wants a career in politics, he will have to enter the army, right? The Roman army. But they point out public speaking, right? If you want to be a Roman of influence, you need to convince other people, right? You need to be able to speak publicly and speak well, right? Not just, you don't want to be nervous with your voice cracking, but you want to know rhetoric, right? You need to know how to address the crowd and get them to agree with the thing you're trying to say, right? And democracies are like this, right? Democracies place a pretty high value on argumentation and skill in critical thinking. That's what allows you to win the day, right? It's not about force, it's about persuasion. What are some of the things that we see happening to Lucius in daily life? Like, where does he go? What does he see? Right? Yeah. Yeah, he kind of follows his father around. And actually, before we go any further, they mentioned that both in the life of Lucius here and the life of Domitia, was it Domitia 2 or 3? Is it 3? Yeah, Domitia 3. Both of their fathers had clients. I don't think it comes up in the textbook, but we should point it out. The Romans had a very interesting system binding people together, the patron-client system, okay? And so, what does it mean to be a patron? Just to you. You support something? Yeah, economic support. We've heard of Patreon, right? Yeah, Patreon is kind of a play on that patron word, right? Yeah, patrons are someone who supports something else. And so in Rome, all Roman men were patrons of some people and were clients of others, okay? So society was kind of this hierarchical thing. And so some men had lots of status and power and money, and other people had a little less, and some people had not much at all. And so if you were a patron of someone, then you would help them out, right? So you would have a little more money than them, a little more power and prestige. And so, if they needed if they needed to be loaned money, you might loan money to your clients. If they might want to launch a political career, you might support your clients in their political career. You just kind of be like a benefactor and a bit of a role model, right? The clients, on the other hand, every Roman man was also a client of someone else. And so if you were a client, you kind of went to your patron's house, you sort of gave him respect, you supported his political career, right? If he was trying to get something passed, you would run around and try and get people to vote the way your patron wanted them to vote. If your patron was trying to raise money for something, you might give him a little bit of money so that he could, maybe build a fountain or some such thing. If he's in the law courts making a speech, all the clients show up and cheer for their patron. And so kind of all the men in Rome are connected to other men in sort of a patron-client relationship. And so, again, unless you're at the very bottom of society or the very top, you have clients yourself, but you're also a client of someone else, right? A Roman man with more status, more power, more money, right? So everyone's kind of connected together in this patron-client relationship. And so we saw that, I think, with Lucius's father and also with Domitia's father. The clients came over to the house early in the morning and kind of paid their respects to their patron, and then they went to the forum together, right? And so it's almost like an entourage kind of thing, right? People with entourages, well, you might not agree with this, but the idea is that if you have a big entourage, you're a pretty big deal, right? Yeah, that's the idea. And so for the Romans, it was the same thing. To walk into the forum with a big entourage of clients behind you was like, oh, that's somebody, right? That's someone with power and authority, with all these clients, following behind him. Yeah, so we see that in both cases. They both men have clients, and I think Lucius's father is a client of Domitia's father, is he not? Yeah. What was his name? Something Ahenobarbus. Can't remember Domitia's father's name. At least I don't think I can. At least I don't think that. I think that was his name. So we saw that with the men. With Domitia, what did we see in their life? What was kind of going on?
Learning how to, like for the married girls, they all have to wear the jewelry and stuff their husbands bring them.
Mm-hmm.
They go out, have fun, then come back, do nothing at home.
Yeah, well, both of the households we saw were households that were probably somewhat wealthy, right? Domitia's father, I think, is more wealthy than Lucius's father, but they have kind of household slaves, right? They have servants to kind of clean and cook and take care of the house, and so yeah, Domitia and her sisters kind of, hang out at home, and then they go to the baths and they go for a walk in what was it? The portico, right? The portico of, I can't remember. Not necessarily. I think museums are kind of a bit more of a modern invention, but they did in these porticos, so it's kind of like shaded areas with gardens and paths. There are lots of statues that mark important people in Rome's history, right? Important generals or politicians or emperors in this case. Yeah, so history is kind of mixed into the public space. But I don't think the Romans had museums quite the way that we kind of understand them. I think that's a modern thing, but they definitely had, history was on display, if you will, in the forum, in public buildings, in these little shaded porticos that people could walk in. Yeah, you would see history kind of played out. We saw that girls were engaged to be married quite young, right? Even if they wouldn't get married for another few years after that, their engagement started when they were like 8 years old, and then they got married when they were 15. Yeah, very, very, very odd to our modern sensibilities, right? Totally normal for the Romans, but for the modern world, a little shocking.
We still have that in our country, but not that young, maybe some 50 or 80.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's true, right? Some countries still, start looking at engagements and marriages quite a bit younger than other countries, right? And here in Canada, people are getting married at later and later ages, right? Do you know how old your parents were when they got married?
22 and 27.
22 and 27?
38.
That's old
Yeah.
for this day and age, yeah. Do you know? 20s, yeah. I think, Adel?
Like, I think we got
28? Yeah, interesting. So that's a bit of a mix of ages, but even a little bit older. I thought my parents would be on the older side, but they're actually not. They were married when they were what was it? 78, 66. I think they were 24. They were 24 when they got married. But even at the time, that was a little bit late. Like people were pressuring them, and they're like, "Are you going to get married ever?" And they finally did when they were 24. But of course, nowadays that's young. But it's not 8 years old or 15 like in Rome. But again, people also didn't live quite to the age that we do today. So you had to get going on these things a little bit earlier. Right. Okay. So what's happening in Rome? Kind of where we need to get here is to the end of the Republic, because that's where things really get wild and crazy and exciting. But things happen during this Republican period that we should probably have some background in. One of them is the fact that Rome will continue to expand. Okay, so the Romans kick out the Etruscans. They, have control of their own city and the territory around it. But Rome will always feel suspicious of their neighbors, right? So, if you will, Rome is always kind of like looking over the neighbor's fence and wondering, are they going to attack us? Maybe we should attack them first, and then they won't be able to attack us. And so they do. Often they kind of preemptively attack people next door to them because they're worried about themselves being attacked. But of course, once you subdue your neighbor, well, now you have a new neighbor, right? And you're looking over the fence saying, I wonder if they're going to attack us. Maybe we should attack them first. And so the Romans kind of get sucked into this thing where they're always suspicious of their neighbors, and they often wind up attacking them in order to ensure that they themselves won't be attacked. So kind of constant warfare becomes a way of life for the Romans pretty quickly. And as a result, their territory continues to expand. And so very quickly you can see here, Rome creates a republic in about 500 BC. I think it's 509. And, within a couple hundred years, they have conquered all of Italy. But of course, they will continue further, right? They're going to get into conflicts with the Macedonians. And so this will be the descendants of Alexander, right? So Philip and then Alexander will conquer Greece. And then Greece will come under the control of Macedonian kings. And the Romans will get into some conflicts with these Macedonian kings. They'll fight 3 wars with Carthage. Carthage, I think we mentioned, is a city-state that's on the north coast of Africa. It's modern-day Tunisia right now. And so they're going to fight some wars with Carthage. And so, as you can see here, geez, can I even read that? Where are we here? This is actually a little bit later in Roman history, but I just kind of put it up there. So Carthage, you can see, is in that yellow section on the north coast of Africa. Macedonia, of course, is this green area here. It says Dalmatia, but that's a later Roman name. Oh, sorry, Macedonia is right here. The Romans will get into conflict with pretty much everybody because, again, they will keep expanding because they don't want to be attacked, but also they'll keep expanding because it starts to make people really wealthy, okay? And so the Romans will kind of use this excuse like, oh, well, we're just attacking to defend ourselves, right? The best defense is a good offense kind of thing. But really what's happening is that the Roman Empire is becoming insanely rich in the process, right? So if you're a general and you take over a bunch of land, basically you get to keep anything you can take, right? And so you keep it and you divide it amongst your soldiers. Then your soldiers get rich and they're like, great, let's take over the next piece of land, right? Meanwhile, those newly conquered territories have to pay taxes to Rome. And so all of that money is pouring into Rome. And the more that the Romans take over, the more everybody gets rich. Generals, soldiers, the city itself, not so much the peasants, but we'll get to them. So this kind of warfare thing becomes a huge money-making enterprise. There's a lot of money to be made in conquering other parts of the world. And the Romans will get quite good at doing it, and they will continue to take over as much as they can. And so here you can see this is probably closer to the end of the Republic, maybe the early Empire period. So this is a little later than where we are. But you can see that the Romans have conquered basically all of Western Europe, all of North Africa, a big chunk of Asia Minor, and actually they make their way halfway into Britain as well, a little bit later on. And so they take over huge sections of land. And again, it's makes people a ton of money. Right. So I have some video to show you, and it will, just to keep us from having to read the textbook the whole way through, it'll give us some background on some of those years of conquest. Okay, and so this is kind of the middle Republican period middle to late Republican, where Rome has taken over Italy, they've gotten rid of the Etruscans, but then they're going to keep getting into conflicts with other people, specifically the Carthaginians. And so again, Carthage is on the north coast of Africa. Rome will get into a bit of a feud with Carthage, and they'll fight basically 3 wars with them in the process of this whole thing. But we'll watch this bit of the video here. Oh. Hang on, online people, I neglected to put this into Microsoft Teams, so I'm just going to put it in there now. I apologize. Give me 10 seconds here, and I will do that. Here it is. I knew I was forgetting to do something last night, but this is what it was. Okay. Teams. Okay. Hopefully this will work. All right, so for online people, the video is just loading in there. I'll tell you when it's loaded. And what we'll do is we'll watch from the beginning to 21 minutes and 10 seconds, okay? I'll just put that little thing that's in the live chat on YouTube. So you'll watch from 0 to 21 minutes, then we'll have a break, and then we'll come back, okay? And so there. Okay, so the video is now uploaded, so you should be able to see it now. It says the Roman Empire, episode 2. So I'll turn you online people loose to watch that first 21 minutes. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've seen. Okay, so yeah, Microsoft Teams video should be there. 21 minutes. Take a break. See you when we come back. Okay, everyone, we are back. As you can see, it was kind of a few centuries of pretty hardcore warfare for the Romans, right? So they kicked out the Etruscans, they conquered most of Rome or most of Italy, and then they kind of kept going. And as you heard in the documentary, they were, suspicious of their neighbors and didn't really want to be attacked or taken over by, by their next door neighbors, sort of thing. But the other thing that kind of happens again is that warfare becomes very profitable for the Romans, right? So every time you take over more land as a general and your army, you kind of get to keep all of the stuff you can steal, sort of thing. But that also becomes kind of a Roman province, right? And that province starts to pay tribute or starts to pay taxes to Rome. And so Rome starts getting super rich from the conquest of all this territory. And the more you take over, the more rich that you get. It's also politically useful too, because as Rome gets bigger, there's more and more kind of prominent men who want power. But of course, Rome is only so big. Remember when we talked about that cursus honorum thing? There's only so many positions in Rome, right? And you've got a lot of competition for them. But if you have all of these Roman provinces, suddenly, you have new positions, right? People can go out there and sort of gain status and power and wealth by being a governor of a Roman province. And so as the empire kind of gets, well, it's not really an empire yet, but as the land that the Republic controls gets bigger and bigger, it means more wealth for generals, more wealth for soldiers, more wealth for Rome, and it means kind of extra opportunities for Roman men to gain power and prestige, right, by being the governor of a Roman province. And again, maybe one of the more famous ones, if you know your Bible stories, is Pontius Pilate, right? He's the guy who officially condemns Jesus to death, right? They sort of have Jesus arrested, and he goes before the Roman governor of Palestine, Pilate. And Pilate, of course, in the Bible, questions Jesus about what he's done wrong, but in the end, at the sort of pressure from Jewish authorities, Pilate says, you know what? Whatever, you want to execute this guy, we'll execute him, right? I don't care so much. I'm just trying to keep the peace in my province. And so again, if you know your Bible stories, you'll know that a Roman governor has kind of a big part to play in the crucifixion of Jesus. But again, when we get to sort of the late empire period, we'll see that the state starts breaking down because it was a governmental system. The Roman Republic, that little graphic that I showed you with all the colored squares, was a system that was kind of meant to run a city-state, right? It was meant to run Rome and sort of the area around it. But it's not really meant to govern a territory that's, encompasses most of the Mediterranean. And so cracks start to appear in this sort of republic system. So again, the one new position that gets added are governors, and governors are appointed by the Senate, and you get a 5-year term, and you get to run your Roman province, whatever it might be. And again, Pontius Pilate was one of these, appointed by the Roman Senate and sent to sort of keep an eye on the area and make sure there was no trouble. But again, even those positions became hyper competitive, right? So if you became a Roman governor, it was very attractive, right? Because you'd be kind of where the action was. Sometimes you'd be involved in military campaigns, and so you could sort of gain sort of status and prestige by being a governor. You could get military glory and experience there, and you could make a bunch of money because, again, whatever, the land that your army takes over, you get to take all of those people's stuff, right? And you can get super rich from doing so. And so being a Roman governor starts to become a very desirable appointment, right? Because you can really benefit, right, in terms of status and prestige and finance. You, it's a it's a sweet deal for Romans who want to become rich and powerful. And again, it was one of the things they mentioned in the documentary was it's kind of an empire by accident, right? They're not necessarily trying to build an empire, but they kind of just keep conquering and conquering has such great material benefits that they just keep doing it, right? And it's not really an attempt to build anything. It's just, hey, we're making money off this, let's keep going. And so they do. But again, the system starts to come apart because this sort of quest for power and glory and sort of financial success starts to erode what Rome was kind of built on. And some of the ideas of putting Rome first, putting community first, the example of Cincinnatus. Remember Cincinnatus, who was elected dictator to defend Rome, and then when he had defended Rome, he gave up his power and went back to his farm in a very sort of humble way. All of those kind of ideals of what it is to be a Roman start to get kind of lost in the shuffle. So I have a little section for you to read here, 3 pages, and it talks about what's happening kind of in the late Republican period. And so these are some developments that are important in kind of the coming apart of the Roman Republic. And so you'll read about these 2 Gracchi, which is the plural for Gracchus. I think they are cousins. So there's Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, and then I think it's a cousin or a nephew of his, Gaius Gracchus. I forget. They're related, though. They sort of propose some things to the assembly, which you'll read about. You'll read about the legacy of those proposals. You'll hear about Gaius Marius. So Gaius Marius is going to reform the Roman army. And as you heard in the documentary, the Roman army is the first state standing army, right? Most states in the ancient world don't have a standing army. It's just citizens who pick up the sword when the city-state is threatened, right? That's how it was with the Athenians and the Spartans and everyone else. But here in Rome, they actually create a full-time professional army. There are people who being a soldier is their only job, right? And so Gaius Marius here will reform that army in a particular way that will have consequences. We'll read here about Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and he does something that's quite shocking. You'll read about that. He'll do something when he returns to Rome, which you'll read about. And then the significance of the civil war. There'll be a spoiler alert. There'll be a civil war between Marius and Sulla, and so. So you'll see some ways in which the sort of traditional way that the Republic has operated and the sort of traditional values of the Romans will kind of be tossed aside. But again, you'll see that when you read. So I'll turn you loose. I'll let you read that, and maybe I'll put 12 minutes on the clock here, and maybe in 12 minutes we'll touch base and kind of see where we are, okay? So go ahead, read that section, and then we'll answer some questions, okay? Okay. So as you can see from this reading, well, a couple of things. One, things are getting pretty wild and crazy here in the late Republic, right? This is a government and a state in political crisis, right? The second thing is note how much we actually know, right? Think about civilizations where we couldn't read their writing, like the Indus River Valley civilization. We have no idea what's going on with those guys, right? All we have is a bunch of seals and there's bulls and yoga poses, and we have no idea what's happening. But here, we know people's names, we know what their political career was like, we know what they said and what they did and who they're related to, and there's a huge amount of information here that we do not have for most ancient civilizations. So we can really study the Romans in a lot more detail just because we know an unbelievable amount about what was going on, within Rome and with these kind of prominent characters. But first, let's talk about Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. What's the first Gracchus? What's his proposal? I think that's the second one. I think that's the second Gracchus. So that's Gaius Gracchus, who proposes extending Roman citizenship to other Italians outside of Rome. But what's Tiberius Gracchus's proposal? That's what now?
Land distribution.
Yeah, land redistribution, right? So the Romans are taking over more and more and more and more land, but all of that land seems to be winding up in the hands of the people who are already super wealthy, right? And Tiberius Gracchus here says, hey, I want to pass a law that ensures that some of the poor people will have access to this land as well. That will sort of, help create some equality in society. It'll give us more soldiers because you need to own land in order to serve in the military. And so this will benefit all of us, right? How's that go over? Huh?
It was passed by the plebeians.
Right. He goes to the plebeian council and he passes it, which is weird. And this is one of the things about the Roman Republic. Because the Republic is kind of the first of its kind and it's kind of evolving over a long period of time, there's a lot of overlap between like the assembly and the plebeian council and the Senate. And so, nowadays we have much clearer rules about jurisdiction, about who has power to do what. Like, for instance, with immigration, okay? So when we're talking about closing borders because of COVID, so currently the border between the US and Canada is closed, although not entirely, but it's another story. Currently the border is closed, and that is a federal decision, right? So the borders of Canada are within the federal government's jurisdiction. The province of BC doesn't get any say in that. They just have to do what the federal government tells them to, because it's not in the province's jurisdiction, it's in the federal government's jurisdiction, right? But here in ancient Rome, the rules are a little bit more fuzzy in terms of who has the power to pass this law or that law. And so here, rather than pass it in the assembly, Tiberius Gracchus gets this passed by the plebeian council instead. And so it still has force behind it, but, is that constitutional? We don't know. It's kind of a gray area. But what happens to Gracchus? Yeah, he gets murdered by senators with basically whatever they can find, right? They beat him to death on the floor of the Senate with chairs and table legs. Whoa. Can you imagine Nancy Pelosi beating, I don't know, who should she beat to death? Mitt Romney? She's like beating Mitt Romney to death with a chair, with a table leg on the floor of the Senate. Insanity, right? But that's what's happening here in ancient Rome, is that violence has kind of spilled into politics, and it's happening not outside, but actually inside the Senate chamber. What is and so Gaius Gracchus is, I guess, the younger brother. I was mistaken. I think I said cousin. The younger brother of Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. He proposes the same thing, but like we mentioned, he also wants to extend citizenship to the Italian allies. How's that go over? Also not good, right? What happens to Gaius Gracchus? Well, he is killed, but by whom?
Which one?
The second one, Gaius. Yeah, he kills himself, right? Because the consul gets the Senate to pass a law basically allowing him to do whatever he needs to safeguard the Republic. And Gaius Gracchus realizes that the thing that he's going to do is murder him, right? Or have him executed. And so he kills himself. But again, you know, violence is starting to sort of occur in politics, and a lot of rule breaking as well. Well, did you notice some other kind of rule breaking that was happening as you read that thing? Did anything jump out and did you say, hey, that's against the rules? Did you see anything?
Gaius.
What's that?
Gaius Marius.
What about Gaius Marius?
You're not supposed to be consul 2 times.
Yeah, you can only be elected consul once, and then you have to wait 10 years in order to run for consul again, which at these guys' age pretty much guarantees that nobody gets more than one consulship in their life. But Gaius Marius somehow gets elected to 7 in a row, right? That's not right. That's against the rules. But again, people are starting to bend the rules pretty heavily, right? What else happens that's against the rules here? There's some pretty grievous crimes here. What else happens?
Civil War.
Which war?
Civil War.
There's a civil war between the Italian allies and Rome itself because they want citizenship. What else? What's that? Sulla? What does Sulla do? Yeah, he marches on Rome itself, right? So, what's that?
With a Roman army.
With a Roman army, yeah. So Sulla, this is the last thing I'll say because we're out of time. Sulla is given command of an army to go after this Mithridates guy. Sulla gets him kicked out of the city, and Marius gets him kicked out of the city, and then Sulla comes back into Rome with his own army, right? So he marches on the city he's supposed to be defending, basically holds the Senate hostage and says, give me the command against Mithridates, which they do because they've got a sword to their throat, basically. And then he goes off and does it, and then there's more coming later. But again, highly, highly illegal, right? You cannot take an army and march on your own country, right? You cannot do that. But he does it. In theory, actually, a general cannot enter Rome with his army. And so as soon as a general steps within the walls of Rome, he is stripped of his command and he is no longer a general. In theory. That's the way it's supposed to work. Huh? Yeah, but they'd be given a command to go out, right? So Sulla would say, okay, Sulla, you are in charge of this campaign against Mithridates. Go out and deal with him, and then when you come back, right? So Sulla would come back, he would enter the walls of Rome, and he would be stripped of his command, and he would not be able to enter with his army. But Sulla clearly violates that rule and comes back in with his army and basically holds the Senate hostage to get what he wants. Insane, right? Imagine Donald Trump coming into the Senate chamber with the US Marines behind him and getting them to do something that he wants. Insanity, right? Total insanity, but it's happening, right? Right here in the Roman Republic, this stuff is going down. Okay, more craziness tomorrow. That is all. Have a nice afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow.